Hello everyone, my name is Krzysztof Binczak. I'm a video game music journalist and an editor at gamemusic.pl. Feel free to visit our website. And I have the pleasure and the privilege to be hosting today's discussion panel on the topic of the role and the function and the shape of audio department in video game developer teams. So without further ado, let me introduce our guests. Olivier Derivière, the composer behind Remember Me and Alone in the Dark and many more. Marcin Przybyłowicz, the composer of the Witcher 3 soundtrack. And Piotr Musiał, whose latest project was This War of Mine. Okay, guys. So welcome, thanks for coming. And my first question to start the discussion is to you, Marcin, because you started out as a freelancer and right now you're the in-house composer for the biggest Polish game developer, basically, CD Projekt Red. So I'd like to ask you, how was this transition, from working for the developer to being part of the development team? What's it like?
It was hard.
Was it?
Yeah, because the first thing I had to change in my life was my waking hours. So before I was able to, get up from the bed on whatever hour I would like to, but now since I have a real job, it's it's not possible anymore. Yeah, but on more professional level, I think it's completely different thing for me. You work very, very, very closely with the developer. You have access to a game every day at any point you like. So it also, of course, have some benefits, but there's always a cost in it. So
what's the price you had to pay?
I've got involved for dragons, swords, and magic for almost what was that? 4 years. That's a lot.
So would you prepare to, still be a freelancer and do projects, like 2 or 3 projects a year compared to this?
Well, people say that whatever you learn when you're young, you're gonna treat it as a habit when you're old. So the same goes for me. I've got those old habits when I was working as a freelancer, and now the part of that, it's still in me, inside of me. So it happens then that from time to time I'm doing some side projects, just refresh my mind and escape for a while to a different world, different realm, and remind myself how it used to be in the old days.
Moving on to you, Oliver, you keep saying that you are actually a freelancer, but you tend to cooperate very closely with the teams. So how was it like for you, in the past few years?
I think the best situation is Marcin's situation, even though you spend 3 years with swords, dragons, and Geralt, because for the result I'm speaking about. If you want the best result for a game, you need to be as close as possible. So when you're a freelancer, what you want to do is to get as close as possible to the team, of course. Yet, you cannot spend 3 years on one project. Why? Because those guys don't need you in their terms. They don't need you. They have somebody in-house that will take care of the music, where you are supposed to do only the music. So when you're a freelancer, you don't have to manage. I'm pretty sure Marcin is managing much more than music, and maybe you can explain what he did exactly on The Witcher. And basically, I'm doing, for some projects, such as Remember Me, what Marcin did on The Witcher, but in much less, I'd say, input than what he did. So we can ask him, maybe.
And Piotr, you have something that I think is a hybrid of the situations of what the other guys have, because you're still a freelancer, but at the same time you're very close with the guys from 11-bit studios. So how is it like? How is your daily routine of working with them?
I really like being a freelancer, and well, the situation with 11-bit studios is a fortunate one. It's a history of projects. So I kind of, upgraded from a freelancer at 11-bit studios to a composer, still freelancer, but a composer who does most or all of the projects. We'll see. I hope so. Well, what else?
Okay, so
Can I ask a question about the audience? Is there people about audio here?
Oh, we have some already. Nice.
And composers? Do we have composers? Okay, thank you. Just to see the interest. Thank you.
we're going to have a short Q&A session with the audience at the end, so in like half an hour from now. So if you have any questions, then please don't forget them until the very end. All right, guys, so the topic I'd like to move to is sound design and separating sound design from composing. So should a composer be a good sound designer as well, or is it better to separate it, whenever possible and have two professionals working on two separate things?
Maybe I will start by saying that we are all kind of sound designers too. So, for example, Oliver's Remember Me has a lot of sound design elements. A lot of the soundtrack is built upon the sound design. And, well, for example, the Sword of Mine also is built kind of on sound design, as a lot of the elements in the music come from sounds of the guitars, but all the pads, all the ambiances are made from a guitar sound. So we are also sound designers, but I personally prefer to separate it. I would like to have contact. I usually have some contact with the sound designer himself, but I really like working separately. It's just me.
For me, it's interesting enough that I started to work at CD Projekt Red as a sound designer, and then later on switched to music. So, and I'm still doing some sound design jobs from time to time. That's why I think it's good to know how sound designers work, how do they think, what kind of work do they do, and how actually the sound palette of a game relates to a soundtrack. Eventually, you're gonna end up during development process when you have to deal with amounts of sound versus amounts of music you will score in particular segments of a game. Let's take cutscenes, for example, which are I think the good example here, that it's not all about firing all artillery in music and using the heaviest cannons in sound design, because basically you will lose your essence of a sound narration, of audio narration, and what you want to tell by the sound and music. So I learned that it's good to know how sound layer in games behaves, what kind of role sound has to do in games, and then how it reacts with the music itself.
Assuming there are two different people working on music and sound design, what is usually the kind of relationship between them? Is it like one giving guidelines to the other, or?
I can tell you how we work at CD Projekt Red. My room, my studio is next to two other rooms occupied by sound designers, and whenever I've got a question or I'm not sure about what kind of narration we should do in certain part of the games, I just drop by into different room and say, hey Pavel, show me this, show me that, let's confront ideas, let's brainstorm a bit how we would score the audio palette for this part of gameplay, and where it can take us. So but I'm considering myself a lucky guy here, because for me it's very easy to just go next door and ask a guy. when you're freelancing like Piotr or Oliver, for example, imagine, I also know that from my own experience, it's sometimes not as easy as it could be.
Okay, so Oliver, let's say that you as a freelancer are beginning work on a new project, and who is usually your single point of contact in the development team, if there is any?
Well, I think we need to define sound design, music, and audio with this, because when you enter a project such as those I did or any project, you have somebody that has a vision, and this vision is usually from the creative director or a sort of a group over there of creative direction, and then you have an audio director that is supposed to deal with sound design and music. And a sound designer is a full-time job, in my opinion. I mean, of course, if you have the budget to afford this. And then my relationship is usually with the creative director concerning the vision, with the audio director concerning the integration of the music and how the music will work with the overall audioscape. Because in the end, it's not sound design versus music. It's sound design with music. How do you deal with this? And you have to have somebody that take decisions about this. And usually it's called an audio director.
Can you tell us a bit more about, because you've worked with many developer studios over the years, so you've seen it all around the world, basically. Can you tell us a bit about the most common organizational structure, so to speak? What is it like?
If I may say, there is no one way of doing games. Every time I start doing a game as a developer, it's like I learn a new job, I learn a new way of working. Yet, it tends to be that audio directors are now the key people to work with. And this is what I've been through for the last, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games. I was working with audio directors directly. But once again, it's not his vision concerning the music choice. It's the creative director's vision going through the audio director and myself for delivering the music.
Talking about the vision of the game, when I was reading the book A Composer's Guide to Gaming Music by Winifred Phillips, she often wrote about something that she called creative feedback, meaning that she as a composer provided some feedback to the other guys from the development team, like you said, the creative lead and so on, and that it changed the game in some aspect. At least that's what she wrote. Do you guys recall anything like that from your own experiences, that you provided some input back to guys from the core development team that actually changed the game?
Regarding the game in general or just our field of expertise?
I think she meant the game in general.
I only remember one thing. I did mention some back in the day. I did mention that since we are having a Novigrad, which is the biggest city in the Witcher universe, in The Witcher 3, it would be nice to have some street musicians and have them play stuff, whether it would be some arranged music or just some single instruments to basically enhance the feeling of a living world. So and we actually did it. So when each time when you enter a square or in Novigrad or some I don't know market or something, you're gonna sooner or later end up hearing those bands. So that's the one thing I can remember.
Yeah, there are times that in groups, such groups like 11-bit Studios, that's a small studio. It's really a couple of teams doing very often different projects. And in such small groups, it's possible to give a creative feedback and be able to somehow influence the developers to change something in the game. It has happened before.
The one example I can give is on my very first game. It was a horror game, and the creative director said to me, so the player enters this big corridor, and he has to feel very, very scared. You know, Olivier, he has to fear going through the corridor. And I was like, okay, so I wrote the score, I wrote the music, and you know, it takes time to put some fear in music. Music takes time, you know it. I mean, if you don't know it, music takes time. And then he showed me the level with the corridor, and it was like this, and he was done with the corridor. So I said, I'm sorry, but I can't have some fear. I can't have, you know, the feeling that you need. So the next day, the corridor was like, you know, very, very long. So this is, you know, sometimes you can do things like this.
Let me guess, it was dark in there.
It was dark.
Okay, guys, so even if you're a freelancer, you're still becoming a part of the team, at least for a few months. And is it always better to work on site with the other guys, or do you prefer to work in your, you know, home studios and so on?
Well, I don't have a comparison. Marcin?
I can say there's one difference. When you work in-house, you're supposed to deliver progress day by day on a daily basis. But when you do stuff at home, nobody cares, actually. You just do not blow up the deadline and you produce good stuff, but no one's gonna care if, for example, your inspiration goes on a vacation and you just, you know, sitting left alone by the computer and do nothing because nothing is happening in your head, for example. So you can take day off. And luckily, day after, you know, you can start doing some creative work again. So, and I don't suppose it's that common when you work in-house. When you work in-house, you have schedules, you have producers, you have deadlines. You know, you need to iterate your stuff all the time. So for me, that's the main difference.
What's the sure benefit of being a freelancer is that you can do multiple projects at a time, and generally you pick which one you will do today and which one you will do next day. You know.
Yeah, but how is it with the, you know, ever famous creative freedom? Is it like, you know, when you're working in-house, then you're just cascaded the things you need to do, or do you still retain, you know, the amount of freedom that you think you need as an artist?
Well, there are plans, obviously, because, you know, video games are projects not done by, you know, two people anymore. Those times are way beyond us. So everything needs to work as a perfectly adjusted machine, especially when you have, for example, 300 people strong team like we do. So that's an army of people, and they need to work in synchronization. So obviously there are some tasks I am supposed to deliver in certain order, of course, because, for example, when level artists are done with some part of the world, then I can, you know, take that on my workshop and work on those levels until other stuff in game is finished. But it doesn't mean my creativity is tight. It's still, to some big degree, it depends on us, how we do it, what we do it exactly, and what will be the outcome of that. If, of course, we're gonna meet, you know, those general criteria we're gonna set up before we start working, right?
Okay. Moving on. Oliver, let's assume you're starting a new project, you meet with the guys, and what are the first things that you require from them, you know, to start creating a concept of the music? Is it like the early artworks, or do you talk with the guys? How's it going?
Well, I talk with them, yes, and when I talk generally about the gameplay. And this is something that that might sound weird, is that a composer will go and discuss with a creative director and will first ask him, what's your gameplay? You know, what's your gameplay mechanics? What have you done with this level design? Why? All those questions. Why is this? Because we're not making a movie, we're not making anything but a video game. And what is a video game? It's a gameplay mechanics all over the way, you know, unless you want to even Gone Home. I don't know if you know Gone Home. Has a gameplay mechanic, you know. Yes. So anyway, gameplay is the first thing you talk with them, and it will lead me. It will lead me to the choice sometimes of what instrument I'm gonna, you know, be able to use. Why? Because if the gameplay is something very fast, like you want to be very tight with the action, then you don't want to have something, you know, musicians that need time to expose, you know, to be like, oh, okay, maybe you want electronic music because then it's going to be very tight with the pace of the game, or maybe, you know, orchestral music that you. So anyway, this will lead me already, but also it will help because it's a way, you know, it's not me giving away my composition, it's them feeding me and me giving them composition ideas, and it's a, you know, it's a process like this. It's not me and them, it's together. So all together we end up with, you know, talking of course about the story, about the characters and everything, but in the end it's a collaboration, fully collaboration.
Okay, so at this point when you are sort of discussing the vision and the early concepts of the game as well, because the game is very early on usually, I think, what is the main matter in dispute between you and the other guys? Meaning the main point of conflict. What do you guys argue over with developers, if there's anything like that?
Well, if I have to start, I would say that I have something in mind that I cannot produce, and I have to defend this idea up to the very end when we go to produce it, and hopefully they will be happy with what I've done. Because it's very difficult when you tell anybody, oh, I'm going to do Remember Me, so I'm going to go record an orchestra, and then I'm going to go back to my studio, and I'm going to manipulate the recording to kind of screw up everything we did. I mean, you know, anybody that is healthy would be like, no, this is not happening, you know. So I've been working with crazy people, and I'm happy, you know, with this. But you know, that's the trick part, is to convince without having the proof it works. To me.
You guys, anything you'd like to mention?
The only thing I would add to what Oliver said about this first question he's asking, what's the gameplay? I would add a second one to that. What emotions will this game trigger in me as a viewer? What emotional palette are you going to have in game? Because that's what resonates with me very well. And right after the gameplay question, I asked that what kind of feeling, what kind of mood of the game you want to achieve. I think that's also equally important.
Piotr, your latest project, this War of Mine, very emotional stuff. So do you agree with Marcin?
Yeah, of course. In this War of Mine, emotions were really the clue of the music too. So the game is very emotional. The music has to be emotional, but not, you know, overly saddening or you know, overly suggestive. So you have to leave some space for the player to, you know, to interpret the emotions himself. But yes, of course, we are talking about gameplay, then emotions, and then we sometimes have to discuss the style of the music if it needs discussion, because sometimes it's very clear what you want to do. But sometimes it's like, okay, we want this because we got used to the reference tracks. And then I come in and say, okay, maybe let's try it this way and that way. And okay, let's pick the best one. Well, in this War of Mine, we have a couple of trials, and we've picked the best one.
Piotr mentioned reference tracks that you got from the developer teams. Is this common, you know, in other teams, that they give you samples of music they think it would match the game, or not really?
Listen, every studio is different. Every people in a studio is different. And if I give you an answer now, and maybe you ask Marcin and Piotr, and then another guy and another guy, we'll have different answers. So I don't think there is a generic answer to this. Of course you may, sometimes you don't, whatever. The thing is to just go back to the role of audio department, because I was looking at, the tagline, the role of audio department, and I was wondering, if you guys are about the role of audio departments, it's much more something that I can answer about the music on my own, of course, what I want to do for music. I cannot tell much about sound design, but in my opinion, the role of audio is to, enhance the player experience, which is very basic to say, but very rarely this is what the audio does. Usually the audio does an illustration of what's happening, doesn't enhance. And what is enhancing an experience for a player, is to understand and support what the player is doing, meaning gameplay mechanics. And of course we have emotions with stories, of course we have all those aspects. But I believe that audio has this power that graphics doesn't have, It's abstract, you cannot watch audio, you will feel audio because you hear it, and this is very important to me. I don't know what you think about this.
Well, it's like George Lucas said once, right? Sound is 50% of a movie in terms of feeling, so hands down to that.
I wish budget will be 50% of the game.
Well, the obvious question would be, is it the same with games? So,
Yeah, I think yes. Well, you mentioned reference tracks. The funny story is that when I'm doing some side projects, I usually get those. So my client usually has even a rough, but it's a still idea what does he want from me. But when I'm doing stuff at CD Projekt Red, I do not have this luxury. I am supposed to come up with reference tracks. I am supposed to come up with ideas and then present them to creative director, to game director, to studio head, and basically sell them something what would become our idea of the music for our game. So, it's sometimes easy, sometimes it's hard.
so
Because of the time restraints, I am often in a very luxurious situation where when I come in, the game has already a working prototype. So it also has some reference tracks because the developers didn't want to play death, So it's very often that tracks give me a lot to think of, and often it is that you don't use the style. You don't use the track's style and the pace and the sound of it. You do the contrary, so you see it doesn't work. You can try something else. And often it's your tracks that are the reference, so you have to do something different.
Can I move on the role of audio? Because I'm
Of
thinking
course.
out loud, and I think the role of audio to enhance the player's experience, I'm thinking, is like reward. When you play a game and you hear, a jingle like "doo, doo, 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 doo" in Zelda, you're very happy. That's a very good feeling. It's like when you hear, the music support your actions, like you're in danger, then the music goes down and you feel in danger. So I believe that on a bigger scale than just music, because we're basically composers. I mean, even if we have here a sound designer, composer, sound designer, I don't know how to say, but I believe that audio is very much a way of giving information, reward, mood, a lot of things that maybe graphics cannot do at some point, at some extent.
Okay, I guess we all agree that audio is extremely important, at least for the people who have gathered here. But can a great audio sell the game?
Yeah, sure it can.
Not this question again.
I'm sorry, okay?
No, I don't think so.
Exactly. I knew your answer, and that's why I wanted to ask you. And please elaborate.
Sorry, I disagree. Imagine Star Wars licensed video game without iconic theme by John Williams. It
Okay.
would just it wouldn't work.
You're talking about Star Wars, all right? So whatever it's gonna sell. But you know, that's the thing is when you go to something that nobody knows, nobody, you know, it's like a fresh video game, then usually what people look at, the first thing is the graphics. You know, it's like, wow, you know, they go at the retailer and they look and they're like, wow, the graphics are very good. Then because we have phones and the internet, what people do, they go online and they see the Metacritic. It's like, oh, 71, 82, 92, great. I've never felt or seen, or maybe you did, somebody that would go and say like, what is the audio like? Let me go on the internet, go to YouTube, listen to the audio and be like, oh yeah, the audio is good, I'm going to buy this game.
Okay, but I think you forgot about one thing. So basically humans are built in a way that most of the information comes through eyes, right? So that's why we always look first at the graphics. Then we have ears, we have sense of touch, smell, taste, whatever. And when you experience a game, you obviously analyze graphics first, gameplay as a second part. And you're right, no one consciously gives a crap about sound or music, but it works on people on subconscious level. So that's why, for example, you rarely have music mentioned in video games reviews. Until it's very, very bad or until it's very, very, very good, people do not mention music in video games reviews. For me, because music works in the subconscious level, so it supports gameplay, it supports narration, it supports the story. And if music does it good, okay, a sad part is that we're not gonna be mentioned in the reviews, but at least we know that if, you know, reviewer says in his text that this game has a great gameplay value, or I spent 100 hours on it and forgot about my wife's anniversary, for example, that means that we did a good job, right?
I didn't say audio doesn't mean anything for players, or I wouldn't be here, you know. I
But
fight
it
for
does
audio.
enhance the music this way.
I'm just
the
saying
gameplay.
that it will never help a game to be sold on
Okay.
the shelves, you know.
The question was, what was the question about? Sales or
Yes,
feeling?
sales it was. Can good audio sell the game?
So
help
basically
sell
I
the
was
game?
talking nonsense then.
No, not quite. I think many people listen to you, but
No, but this is why people, I don't know if there are developers here, producers, but people tend to disregard audio over graphics, over, you know, all those things that are predominant, which I tend to understand. But when a game does such a good job with audio, such as, you know, Dead Space, I don't know if you know about this game, or Battlefield, you know, where audio is like so good that people are blasted away, you know, it helps very much the game to live on, you know, it adds this quality that makes the game a hit. So audio will help afterwards, after the sale.
True.
Okay, guys, we're slowly starting to run out of time, so I guess we should start a Q&A session with the audience. So, anyone would like to ask something to our composers?
I want to ask a question for all of you. This is a question problematic for some of the composers. We usually work only with VST tools. So for us, it's impossible to work with orchestra in real life recording session. We're using a lot of times some tools like they already have some prepared composing solution. How do you think if they are becoming more and more popular, it's easier and faster to compose? It's still for you the same way of composing like you approaching it, to use some already prepared solutions to make music in this way? Yes, I know sonokinetic solutions I already know them. And you can answer first on this question.
Yeah, I don't think any tool will actually compose the music for you. So either it's even if it's a sonokinetic loop, which is, we are working on making it more tweakable every day. With each product, it's better. But I'm not here to advertise the products. I don't think that it is a bit a shortcut, of course. But you don't have to use the pre-made loops and all the stuff you can find, which is basically half ready. And please don't. Just use it creatively. You can make it a sort of background of the music. You can make it barely audible. You can use it to enhance the actual music of yours.
80% of the music in Witcher 3 is sample-based. And I also did use loops extensively. So my point on that would be, it's okay to use them. These are all tools, right, for us. It's all that matters is how you use it. If you use it creatively, if you, try, bend them upside down, cut them sideways, resample them, reprogram them to make something new artistically and creatively, it's okay.
Any other question?
Can you name a game which has good graphics, good gameplay?
Louder, please.
Can you name a game which has good graphics, good gameplay, but bad audio?
No, I don't want to say which one were bad. But there are plenty.
Probably one of my first games, but I'm not gonna tell the title.
Yeah, I think there are some of these games. I can't name one currently, but I know I've dropped the game sometimes because of the bad music or sometimes just sounding outdated. I can't stand it.
Questions?
Can I have two questions? Okay, so I just have one. Yeah, as more or less 90% of games are now being done in iterations with agile methodology. So you are going over the process of making a game like 5 or 6 or more times. Sometimes the game changes completely between the first iteration and the last iteration. How does it influence the music? Does the music change with the iterations? Does it happen sometimes that the music from first iteration is completely different from the music from last iteration and you have to compose and rewrite all your tracks from scratch? It's a question for all three of you.
Well, in my experience, even though I've been through this many times, like the game has been changed and changed and changed, never they changed the character, never they changed the overall story, never they changed the core gameplay mechanics. I've never seen any of a third-person shooter that I've scored becoming a racing game. It's still a third-person shooter. So all those things make your life easier when you know that a game is based on iteration. Because if you're smart enough, what you do is you write music completely independently from the game at start, then you wait. And you wait until those guys say, oh, we have to deliver the game in the next month, so you know that they'll be stuck, into what they got. So now you can start scoring the actual game. So, at start, you don't do exactly a score for the game. You do general ideas. You wait, and then you do on the last iteration of the game. This is how I've been working for the last games.
I never experienced a situation like you described a moment ago, but I do remember when we were planning the music for The Witcher 3, lots of side stories were cut off eventually. And that obviously influenced music because some custom-made cues for quests and cutscenes also got thrown away. So it sometimes happens, but hey, that's life, that's how this work is, and you just have to deal with that and adapt to new situations. It's all that matters at the end is how well the project end up at the end of the production phase.
Yeah, I would like to know how often do you get to record your music live? Is it like a standard in the biggest companies, or or are you still leaned more towards creating all the music in a sequencer because it's faster and cheaper?
Could you repeat the question, please? We barely can hear you here.
How often do you get to record your music live? Or is it a standard in the biggest companies, or are you still leaned more towards creating all the music in a sequencer because it's faster and cheaper, probably?
You fight and fight and fight, and you go and you fight. And at some point, I mean, I was telling the story for Supernova, for instance, the last game I scored. We started with orchestra in the eastern lands with Dracula, I don't know, over there. And that was very crazy because the orchestra couldn't perform the music that I was about to write. So that was difficult. Then we moved on to another orchestra because the budget was allowing this. Still, I was, fighting for getting a better orchestra. And all of a sudden, they said, "Oh, we're going Abbey Road." So this is how, I mean, you need to convince them that this is crucial, not for you, not for the music, not for, being like, "Oh, I've been at Abbey Road." They don't care. No, it's for the game. And when they understand this, all of a sudden they have money. I mean, when you have budget. And if they don't have budget, don't even pretend to go live. Do music with the tools you have, because nowadays with the computers, that's crazy what you can do. Why do you want to spend money when you already can do what people couldn't 10 years ago? It's golden for anybody nowadays.
For local Polish game developers, it's really sad, but there is really no discussion about recording an orchestra. Maybe, Martin had some sort of occasion or adventure recording some of the tracks, but basically there is no talk about recording.
Yeah, it's just what Piotr said. Doing live music for a project usually costs money, and the bigger the project, the bigger the budget you're gonna need, and it doesn't scale up evenly, unfortunately. So even for The Witcher, for example, we didn't manage to do all of the music live because of how ridiculous amount of money that would cost us. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that perhaps with the next game we're gonna have some bigger window of opportunity here. But when you do not have possibility, budget, abilities to do live recordings, even those small ones, sessions with some solo, instrumentalists, which can, by the way, very much enhance the music you're working on, you just go back to the computers, and luckily the computing power, the quality of the tools we can use right now is sufficient enough to keep us covered for most of the time. Because still you need to keep one thought in the back of your head that actually it's Oliver who posted on his social channels this one graphic which I think was hilarious, the Kevin Spacey one. So when the new Call of Duty came out, right, you had computer-generated Kevin Spacey. And he did a montage with computer-generated Kevin Spacey and the one from House of Cards. And there were subtitles, sample-based orchestra and real orchestra. And basically, that's how it differentiates. That's the difference between those two. It's gonna still look like Kevin Spacey, but there's only one real one, right? And the same goes for the music.
Yeah, it's all about the money, actually, and we do fight, of course. We have to fight because we have to move forward. If we keep staying on the level of sample libraries, it's like staying in one place. You are not moving forward. So even if you don't see that there is no chance for live orchestra, maybe a good idea would be to record some parts of it. You know, if you want strings, then maybe a quartet, maybe single instruments or vocals.
Okay, guys, looks like we've run out of time, but we'll be here around still if you'd like to ask some more questions. So feel free to come to us and talk. And, well, I guess that does it. So thank you very much, guys, for coming, and a big round of applause for them.